I have guests from both sides of the political spectrum. From the Democrats, we have Joel Rubin. He's the president of the Washington Strategy Group. And we also have Alex Titus. He's an advisor at America First Policies, an organization which supports conservative policy initiatives. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us. I want to first start by reaction. Let's start with you, Joel.
Well, my reaction is that the president has essentially reiterated the arguments he's been making now for 2 years. And these are arguments about a wall, but they're not really arguments that pull in more Americans to build him the political support he needs to end the government shutdown and get the funding that he wants. So we're in a bit of a standstill right now where the Democrats and the president have dug into their positions. He didn't offer a pathway, as the president should, as the leader of the country. He didn't offer a pathway to how to get off this very dangerous ramp right now that we're on, which is a shutdown government with no end in sight. He didn't offer a fig leaf to the Democrats, and that's very concerning in certain terms of whether or not we'll end this shutdown.
Alex?
You know, I think that the president came out tonight and spoke a very somber speech, and it was very sober to a lot of Americans. And I think that he really laid down the points of why this fight is so important and why border security is so important for the American people. And I think that you're going to hear critics from the other side of the aisle attack the president for saying that this speech was politicized. But I think just from what the content of what we actually heard tonight is that it was really important for the president to have the American people understand why the wall is necessary, why we have a crisis at the southern border, and the action that the president is going to take to address that crisis.
Do you think that this is going to have any impact with Democrats?
No, and in fact, Democrats don't see this as a national security crisis. It may be a political crisis for the president, but it's not a national security crisis for the country. We have seen steadily declining illegal immigration rates coming into the United States for much of the past decade. We have a strong system in our government for dealing with that, for interdicting it, and we need to continually strengthen it. But the idea that somehow a border wall is more important than the lives of 800,000 federal workers, a quarter of the federal budget, millions of Americans being impacted, it just doesn't make sense to Democrats, and we don't really see it. Even after tonight, this argument, it doesn't make sense that the government should be shut down as a result of this continual debate and friction.
I've been listening to a lot of the numbers that networks have been throwing around. I think that you can actually find numbers on both sides to support border wall or no border wall. But what I'm really wondering is how much of this is about Democrats not their unwillingness to hand Trump a win, to deliver on his campaign promise over 2020. Does that play into his reelection campaign?
Well, we had this issue litigated in the last election in November, and the American people voted by nearly 10% for Democrats for the House of Representatives, knowing full well that they were voting in a party that did not support a border wall. There is always going to be some level of positioning, but the Democrats, the positions of the Democrats when it comes to this issue are that they want to support funding the government, as the Senate unanimously supported only several weeks ago. Republicans in the Senate voted to keep the government open and not make the wall the litmus test for whether or not we would have a functioning government. That's the concern right now, and that's something that Republicans have backtracked on, and the president himself said he'd be happy to shut the government down, so he really owns this shutdown.
Alex, chime in if you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I'm not entirely sure that the 2018 election was decided by border security. I think that the issue played much more within the 2016 election. Now, we have seen the crisis over the last year on the border come to a level, especially in, I think you pointed out the illegal immigration is dropping, which is true, but the number of illegal drugs that are coming over the border has substantially increased year on year. We had thousands and thousands of pounds of methamphetamine come over the border last year. We had hundreds of pounds of fentanyl, which we know that the opioid crisis is destroying communities across the United States right now. So, I mean, in terms of the president, I think this is really just a big win for him in terms of he can address a very important issue to the American people, as well as try to deliver a political victory to some of the members of his base, too.
And again, I have to go back to what Democrats could possibly get out of this. Why aren't they throwing in any sort of a compromise on this?
Sure.
We're still very far apart,
Sure.
1.3 billion and 5.6. And there's, again, every time either party, who's been in control of the House introduces legislation, it's exactly the way it was.
Yeah, and I served in the Senate, and I handled the House of Representatives for the State Department as a senior official there, and there's always a lot of back and forth and log rolling, as we call it. 1.3 billion isn't small. In fact, President Trump and the funds that he's been appropriated for border security has spent, I think the number is about 1/6 of the dollars already. So the government hasn't even spent all the money they've been appropriated for border security. So Democrats are offering a robust number. The $5 billion number as well. One knows construction projects are never the low number. This could go into the tens, potentially hundreds of billions of dollars. And Democrats don't think that that's a good use of money, that there are better ways to deal with the drug trade, there are better ways to deal with people coming across the border through surveillance technology, through drone technology, through partnerships with local governments, with Mexico, that are going to be more effective and pinpointed than just a long construction of a wall, which is a 19th century solution to a 21st century problem.
Nancy Pelosi has called the border wall immoral. Do you agree? Why or why not?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to jump in quickly. I don't mean to talk over Alex on this one, but I do think that it's immoral from an American perspective. We're a country that embraces immigration, and it sends a signal to Mexico, to our southern friends and allies, that they're not welcome here, that we don't trust them, that we don't really want them in our country, and that we're not going to treat them well when they come here, as the child family separation policy is demonstrating. And to me, that's morally offensive.
I don't think it's immoral at all in terms of that. Even with individuals who are making the trek across the border, it's always safer for them to come to a point of entry. And we know that if we do build a wall, that will at least help funnel some of these individuals to points of entries, which we know, especially with asylum seekers, that's where we want individuals who have legitimate asylum claims and things like that coming through the borders. We want them to come to those points of entry. And I guess I just don't see anything immoral about sort of defining our own sovereignty, our own national security, and really having folks who are not supposed to be coming over here in those specific sections actually just going through the specific areas, those points of entries like everyone else. So I just don't see it that way.
Well, we should make sure those areas are safe, though. And right now we have a crisis where we actually don't have enough beds for families, and there have been 2 young children under 10 years old dying of starvation and dehydration because we don't have proper facilities or care. Why are we putting money into a border wall when we don't have enough facilities in these asylum zones? We need a real plan, and right now the plan has really devolved into a very narrow argument, and that's not good for policymaking. We need to have a broader, fuller discussion on immigration, not just will or will we not support a wall.
Democrats seem, and I'm glad that you made that point, because Democrats seem to be focused on what's happening on the U.S. side of the border, while Republicans are looking at what's happening on the Mexico side of the U.S. border. And one of the statistics Trump had mentioned in his address was 1 in 3 women are assaulted on their trek to the border. Trump said that this is a humanitarian crisis at the heart and soul of this, and he's determined to end it. But I guess, my question is, isn't there an argument to be made on both sides of this for more border security?
Well, I believe there is, but I will tell you, I personally lived in Central America for 2 years as a Peace Corps volunteer, and people in Central America don't want to leave Central America because they just feel like they need to move. There are real crises happening right now in 3 core countries in Central America that are violent. There is significant violence. People are escaping for their lives. These are war-torn countries that now are drug-torn. And it is horrible when there are crimes committed against people heading north, but they're heading north because they're looking for safety. And we need to have a policy that actually does look at that as well. Not cut off these countries, as President Trump has threatened. He's going to rescind their funds if they don't stop sending people. It should be the reverse. We should be putting more money into these countries so people actually don't want to come. That's how you get at the problem. Keeping people in their countries by having them want to be where they live. They're afraid of staying there. That's why they're leaving.
The shutdown is now going into its 18th day. Trump said in his address that he'll be meeting with congressional leaders at the White House on Wednesday. Is anything going to be different in these talks tomorrow?
I think any of your all's guess is as good as mine. I mean, President Trump has made very clear that he has the utmost intention of getting the $5.7 billion for the wall, and I think Democratic leaders have made fairly clear tonight that they don't see that at least as an option going forward at the moment. So hopefully some sort of compromise can be worked out, but I mean, nothing sort of looks concrete at the moment.
Pelosi said that Pelosi said in her speech that Americans, federal workers, were being held hostage. What do you make of that type of language?
So I think that it's a little bit misleading, but I mean, the president has said that he is willing to shut down the government for weeks or months or frankly whatever he has stated before. And I mean, I think obviously we feel terrible for those federal workers who are currently losing their paychecks right now, and hopefully there can be some sort of solution worked out to potentially bypass that. As I think I've heard talk of the Senate trying to do something on that front. But I think in terms of the short-term pain is really bad, but if this can come to a great solution, especially on the immigration question, which is so hard, I think we may be able to have some sort of outcome that would be very beneficial for the country as a whole.
Well, I do think, though, that it's not just the federal workers whose lives are being upended, but it's also all the people who depend on the federal government, people on food stamps, people looking for loans, people looking for their ability to get their farm products out to market. I mean, there is a ripple effect across the country that's happening, and that's what could change this dynamic, per your question. The Senate, Mitch McConnell, his chamber already voted to end the shutdown, but then it reversed when the president changed his tune. The House will pass those bills to end the shutdown. Senator McConnell, he will hear from his colleagues in states where 2/3 of the races in 2020 will be Republican Senate races, and many of those states will be competitive. Those sitting senators will have to look in the mirror and decide, do they want to still be elected in 2020 or not? Because this is hurting them and their constituents, and that may turn the dynamic where Mitch McConnell then says it's time to end the shutdown, and then let's continue debating the wall.